Coming up, hear which tribes are being affected by proposed changes to the federal air rules for reservations. An Oglala Lakota student marches on to success in healthcare and reviving the coming of age ceremony for Karuk women. We'll get a look at the documentary A Long Line of Ladies. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amadawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start in Arizona, where there's still no resolution in sight for the Cocopah tribe in southern Arizona over a makeshift border wall. Earlier this year, 122 shipping containers were placed on the U.S.-Mexico border by Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. That came without the consent of the tribe. 42 containers are still on Cocopah tribal lands, despite a letter from the Interior Department asking the Bureau of Reclamation to work with the tribe. Ducey says he was trying to close the gaps along the southern border. The containers are now blocking a road to the tribe's land and is causing public safety issues.
It is our belief that the Bureau is doing all those things that are necessary to resolve the situation in the best way possible for all concerned. In fact, the containers at this time are occupying half of a full roadway, and the equipment that was used to place them there has done damage to the roadway, making it very difficult for public safety vehicles to have access through there without becoming stuck.
There is no word on when the state of Arizona or the Bureau of Reclamation will remove the container cars. When the calendar says December in western South Dakota, there are three things that you can count on: snow, wind, and LNI. This year, all three came at once as a blizzard rolled in just as the Lakota Nation Invitational got underway. Stuart Huntington has more.
1, 2, 3.
Undeterred by some challenging weather, more than 3,000 students and student athletes descended on Rapid City, South Dakota this week for the 45th annual iteration of what started nearly half a century ago as a small high school basketball tournament, but has grown to so much more.
No longer just a basketball tournament. When we start adding events, the basketball is not the biggest thing anymore. We have our hand game tournament, which is over 50 teams. The basketball is bringing in 48 teams.
Today, a visitor to L&I can take in wrestling matches, browse vendor booths, get inspired by student art, and that's just the beginning.
Oh, it's a gathering of the Oceti Sakowin, the great Lakota, Dakota, and Dakota nations, where people come here to see the games and all the events that are here, and see relatives, and it's tremendous. You know, we can't say enough about, this gathering of the Oceti Sakowin.
But for some, the allure is still the hoops.
I'm very happy. I've been ready all year to play with my boys, and we're just been ready. We've been waiting for this. We've been waiting to bring back this championship.
In Rapid City, South Dakota, Stuart Huntington, ICT News.
The Lakota Nation Invitational continues through this week and wraps up Saturday evening with the Boys and Girls Championship basketball games. In Ecuador, malnutrition continues to plague indigenous children. Health officials from the United Nations are warning that for the country's 18 million people, starvation is one of the biggest public health problems. According to the UN's Children's Fund, 1 in 3 children suffers from undernutrition, and of those kids, 40% are indigenous, even though Native communities only make up 7% of the population. One farmer with children of his own believes the issue boils down to basic economics.
There are obviously cases of child malnutrition. It exists. I think that is present in almost 90 to 95% of the child population of Cotopaxi due to poverty. There is no work. Anyone, to satisfy the basics, needs money in the first place. That's why children suffer from malnutrition and low performance at school.
In addition to food scarcity, UNICEF says 72% of children lack vital services for child development, like health and education. The Seattle Kraken are one of the newest teams in the National Hockey League, and earlier this month, they asked a Salish artist to design a warm-up jersey for them. ICT senior correspondent Patty Talahongva has more.
Hockey twalbukwa. Hockey is for everyone.
Paige Pettibon is a steward of the Lachute language and came up with that interpretation along with the design for the warm-up jersey.
In the front of the jersey, it's a circle with the Kraken S, and behind that is some geometric shapes, and then there's the medicine wheel colors, so the 4 colors, and they have an arrow, so they go in have some movement to them. And then that's just incorporated throughout with the patch on the sleeve and then the lettering. I had a lot of different designs, and this one was a little bit more simple, and they thought that would look really good with their logo and everything. So I'm a beader, so I took beading designs and added there, and I like to add the medicine wheel and incorporate it in a lot of the work that I do.
Well, what kind of reaction have they had to your jersey?
Oh, it's been very positive, really great. A lot of people wanted to buy the jerseys outright, but they are being for auction for a good cause.
This is the second year the team has paid tribute to Indigenous people. In Phoenix, Patty Talahongva, ICT News.
And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Nearly 40 tribes in the Northwest are being asked to comment on proposed changes in air quality regulations. In 2004, the Environmental Protection Agency created the FARR. That stands for the Federal Air Rules for Reservations. Since then, more tribes have gained federal recognition and have established lands, so the EPA wants to update the laws. Joining us today is Casey Sixkiller. He's the Region 10 Administrator. Welcome to the ICT Newscast, Casey.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So I understand there's a deadline for comments from tribes and citizens. How much time is left to make a comment?
So we published this proposed rule change just a couple months ago, and the public comment period runs through January 10th. And you can see our full proposal and make comments at epa.gov/FARR, FARR.
What are the proposed changes for burn days?
Well, the cool thing about the FARR is it really sets a framework for basic regulations of air quality and reservations. And it's unique to Region 10, to Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. So, 39 reservations, 200,000 residents across those reservations. And what it does is help to really put tribes in the driver's seat of making those kinds of, setting those regulations and then enforcing those regulations. So to answer your question, under the FARR and working with the EPA, we work together to establish what works best for those individual communities.
And when you're making those regulations, can you give us some examples of what that looks like? Is it, prohibiting tribes from engaging in certain activities, or what do those regulations actually look like in practice?
Well, I think the most important part of what we're doing is doing it in close consultation and partnership with tribes. So we worked really closely with tribes throughout Region 10, in particular the Colville tribes in Eastern Washington. But before we even proposed these rules, we did formal consultations 3 times. We've shared science. We've talked about what the unique needs are of individual tribal communities. And again, really tried to build that into the regulations that we put forward, and really having more of an opportunity for tribes to tell us to customize, how this applies in their communities that makes sense to them.
I understand one of the changes that could be implemented is regarding wood stoves. Which tribes would that apply to, and what would the change be?
Well, a number of tribes and tribal communities rely on wood stove heating, especially in the winter months. One of the things the FARR is trying to do is help to make sure that we're working with tribes to set stronger regulations and guidance about the types of wood that is being burned, and the types, and the times of the year that it can be done. So we're, sort of pairing, making sure we're meeting the needs of folks where they are at in terms of heating their homes and keeping their families warm, but also keeping a closer eye on air quality and how that's impacting tribal communities. So, thinking about, burn ban days, thinking about, air quality, making sure that we're using the right kind of wood that's not wet, and putting more particulate matter into the air. But again, really working with tribes and making sure we're doing that outreach and doing that engagement, and where possible, providing alternatives to individual families that can maybe begin to move away from wood burning stoves.
Casey, when you're talking to tribal leaders, as you just mentioned in these consultation sessions, what are their biggest concerns that they're sharing with you?
Well, I think, it varies quite a bit. I think, number one is they want to know about rules that are going to impact their communities. They want to be at the table. They want to be able to bring their own experience and knowledge and scientific background to our conversations. And I think we've done a really good job of creating that space and sort of living our values, right? This is a whole new commitment from the Biden-Harris administration to work nation to nation with tribes as we develop new rules that impact tribal communities. So there, I think we've done that. The second is, folks, especially here in the Northwest, as we have, warmer summers, a longer wildfire season, people really want to make sure they understand what is that balance between the types of, fuel sources that they're using to heat their homes, how they're managing that with wildfire and smoke management. And a number of these tribes, like the Colville tribes in particular, they manage forestry assets. So how are all of those things coming together to help make sure that these communities are being able to address any of the concerns they have, whether it's exposure to smoke, making sure they have heating fuel, and are really addressing those air quality issues, which we know have a huge impact on human health and the environment.
Well, Casey Sixkiller, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
When gold was discovered in California in the mid-1800s, thousands of men flooded the state seeking their fortune. That came at the expense of many native tribes, including ceremonies, which came to an end as access to tribal homelands was cut off by the miners. For more than 120 years, this was the case for the Karuk tribe, but not anymore. ICT's Patty Talahongva sat down with the creatives of a new documentary about this.
A Long Line of Ladies is about one family's effort to bring back the coming-of-age ceremony for young girls. Joining me today is Atayidam and her father, Almi Allen. Also joining us is Shandine Tome and Raika Zeptachi, the directors of the documentary. Welcome, everyone. Let's start with Almi. Was this ceremony done when you were young?
No, it wasn't. When I was coming up as a child in the 70s, there was a lot of revitalization happening, but the ihuk, the flower dance, wasn't one of them.
So how did your family decide to try to revive this ceremony?
So, going back to the 70s, my wife and I were both kind of a product of this revitalization. So coming up in that and having the elders of the day carrying it through a very bleak time in California Indian history when a lot of things were taken away. Then we sort of fast forward to the mid 90s and working with one of my cousins who wrote a master's thesis on everything she documented about the Ihuk. It's called Rebirth of the Ihuk by Lynn Risley. So we worked with her and another tribal scholar and linguist, Julian Lang, to bring it back. And in 1995 is when we had our first Ihuk in, like 100 years or so.
Wow, that's incredible because again, so many tribes are dealing with the loss of their culture, and so to be able to bring this back, what has that meant to your family, your daughters?
Well, our first daughter, she's now 26, to be 27 soon. So, when we did the first Ihuk, we were pregnant with her, and so that generation, they know nothing but having this ceremony. And so what it's meant is that, like, from that point, it came back, it'll always be there. And the children, from that point forward, this is all that they'll ever know. And that's a really good thing.
Yes. Ati, I want to turn to you. You have a beautiful name. I tried very hard to pronounce it correctly, but why don't you tell us your name and what does it mean?
Yeah, my name's Atayadom Pimniha. Atayadom means star in Karuk, and my middle name Pimniha means to fall in love with.
Beautiful. Now, when you were preparing for this ceremony, there was a young woman who was escorting you as you were blindfolded. Tell us about that person and what part does that person play in the ceremony?
Yeah, that's my older sister, Kara. She, through my ceremony, she will be my helper, literally, and she will guide me as I'm blindfolded, and she, help me go everywhere. But she also will help me mentally, and she'll be there to support me the entire time and tell me to just keep being strong and keep feeling the earth, And then after the ceremony, she'll forever be there to support me, and she'll kind of always be my helper through my life.
What does going through the ceremony mean to you, Ati?
Going through the ceremony, it really means it really helps me it really helped me to see how much love that my community and my family has for me. And it helped me to know that they'll always be there for me and that they're always there to support me.
Shantine, how did you hear about this ceremony to even begin to put it together in the documentary?
Yeah, I guess we have a similar ceremony called the Kinota. And it's also when a young woman gets her first period. I didn't have mine, and I think there was a lot of regret for that growing up and kind of seeing the disconnect between how I saw myself as a young woman at the time, and then also I guess how I see myself now, which is very proud and excited to be Dene. But I didn't really have that when I was younger. And so I think to be connected with this film was very much emerging of two very different sides of me as I grew up, and just that pride and seeing Ati and her cousins just be wholly proud of who they are and their community, and they're just miles ahead of where I was when I was a kid. And so there's something very special about that. And Rika brought me onto this project, I think, with that in mind, but I think we kind of didn't really see the potential for it until we fully got into filming, and the excitement behind it all, and also just how amazing the family is.
And Rika, tell me about your interest in this project, and also, is there something similar in your culture?
So there isn't something similar in my culture, but I grew up in Southern California. I'm Iranian American, and I actually grew up in a family that was very supportive, when it came to conversations around menstruation. But I kind of approached it through, I always say, a menstrual equity lens, which for those who don't understand, menstrual equity is, it's really this idea that we should all, have access to menstrual hygiene, menstrual care. We should all have, be openly talking about menstruation and having that knowledge about our bodies, because it's really important. It's really important in creating confidence for young women as they come of age.
Well, I want to thank each one of you for joining us today. Again, Ati and her father, Almi, and also Rika and Shandine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You can watch the full documentary on Vimeo. Just search for the title, A Long Line of Ladies. We'll be right back. A pharmacy student at South Dakota State University is the first Udall Scholar in its history. Jessica Begeman joins us to talk about her inspiration. She was recently featured on the cover of the Alumni magazine. Welcome, Jessica.
Right, thanks for having me.
Only 55 undergraduate students across the country are selected for this out of almost 400 applicants. What does it mean to you to be a Udall Scholar?
I guess like looking at the statistics, it was kind of daunting, but I guess for me it means that, like what I'm doing here at school, my goals, they see that as valuable. So it makes a difference, at least to me, and they see that, I have the ability to succeed. So that's kind of, I guess, where I'm coming from, what it means to me.
What inspired you to choose to study pharmacy?
It's actually a funny story. I played basketball in high school and I got poked in the eye. And our pharmacist in my hometown of Martin, he opened the pharmacy kind of late to get the eye drops to me. So that kind of inspired me. And then coming to college, being involved with the American Indian Student Center and everything, I pursued a minor in American Indian and Indigenous Studies. And that kind of just set it in motion for me that this is definitely what I wanted to do. I want to pursue healthcare. I want to be a pharmacist, specifically in the IHS, so I can give back to my community.
Have you encountered a lot of other Native people who are also pharmacists?
I actually did an internship 2 summers ago with the IHS, and there were quite a few of the pharmacists there that were tribal descent. So I was really inspired by that there were so many at that one clinic. But yeah, that was probably the biggest one for me.
Tell us about medication therapy management.
Yeah, so medication therapy management, or MTM, it's like a program usually set up through pharmacies where they go through patients' medication history. They look at the medications that they're taking and see if they match with their disease states, see if there's any interactions. And if there are, then the pharmacist will talk through it with the patient to see what changes they can be made, really just looking at how to optimize therapy for those patients. And then the pharmacist usually also reaches out to their provider to make those changes to their medication regimen.
I understand you're also involved in ACES, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so our American Indian and Science and Engineering Society at SDSU is kind of focused on increasing the presentation, I guess, of American Indians in STEM fields. So on campus, we do a lot of workshops with students. We did a spooky science carnival for the grade school a couple of years back. I think it was 2 years ago. And then it's just kind of a way for the students on campus to kind of have a community and find that support within our campus.
Jessica, we actually just got through Thanksgiving, and I understand you were actually in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Yeah, I was. We were told, I think at the end of my sophomore year, that the marching band was selected to be a part of the parade. So we were there from the Sunday before Thanksgiving to the Friday after. And it was amazing. Kind of just an awing experience, really, that SDSU had that exposure, that, this kind of small school out in the middle of nowhere, but that we got to be on TV and perform in front of so many people. And it was really just amazing to play for what was almost like 3 million people, I think, that were lining the streets. So it was a really cool experience.
It sounds really cool. I've never seen it in person either, but to be in it, it sounds amazing. We only have a short time left here, but what's next for you and your studies?
So I just finished the second semester of my second year of pharmacy school. So I'll have 2 more years after this. And I'm hoping to apply for a residency either with the IHS or with like a different hospital through like the residency matching program. But my goal is to eventually end up like in a clinic setting where I can help patients through like diabetes management or like anticoagulation care, that sort of stuff. So that's kind of like my overarching goal for my studies.
You know, Jessica, on platforms like TikTok, there are actually some creatives who make videos of filling like medicine bottles and pills and things like that. I feel like, you know, that could be right up your alley and something really cool. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
The Sand Creek Massacre, the betrayal that changed Cheyenne and Arapaho people forever, focuses on tribal accounts of Colorado's deadliest day. Exhibition details at historycoloradocenter.org.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.